Shantanu, thanks for doing this. Just wanted to begin with, very recently one of your Adobe's founders, John Warnock, passed away. He's, among other things, he invented the PDF. You work with him. What are your thoughts on him? What was it like working with him?
Well, the company was started by two amazing individuals, John and Chuck, and both of them were researchers, right? And they met each other at Xerox PARC. And I wrote a note that I know has made its way out, which is it was the privilege of a lifetime. I mean, when you think about technology innovators who've had a profound impact, John invented with Chuck PostScript. Desktop publishing as we know it today would not have existed without their fundamental innovation. He invented Illustrator. His wife Marva was a graphics artist, and people take for granted today WYSIWYG applications, but till then WYSIWYG applications hadn't been created. And then, as you point out, he created PDF. And so, to work for 25 years with an individual who's had that kind of profound inventiveness, right? And then to be asked by both of them to run the company and sort of it's just been the ride of a lifetime, and we will miss him. And he was on the board. He served on our board till his passing, and he was always representing technology and customers. He used our products till the end. And Abhigyan and I have both worked with John. In fact, we had a 30th anniversary of PDF recently at the company, which Abhigyan runs that entire business for us. And so he came for that. And he spoke about, how incredibly proud he is. That's the last thing I'll say. How incredibly proud he was of what the company became. And he recognized that, they were there at the beginning, but it was the 30,000 employees that we have that have taken it to heights never imagined.
So Shantanu, I wanted to ask you that, in this age of AI, how are you reimagining Adobe?
Yeah, well, I think if you think about successive generations of technology, when these successive generations of technology are not just about this is a new technology, it's about how the compounding effect of each of them building on itself, really fundamentally transforms the opportunities that we have. And what I mean by that is, let's take cloud computing. Cloud computing says you're not tethered to a device, correct? Wherever inspiration strikes, if you're a creative person, you now have access to your assets. Mobile means that, the way people consume content or create content has changed forever. And so I think it's these successive generations of technology which, when you build on each other, they provide this, exponential growth. I think the focus on AI, we've always been a company that's focused on AI because AI is all about enabling computers to do what they do best, which is pattern matching. Computers can pattern match. They can do things faster than humans. They can think for you. And what computers can also do is that you can increasingly focus on what you're trying to create rather than the act of doing it on a computer. I think with generative AI, which is where there's this incredible focus, it's about now finally saying, so the cloud allowed all this data to be there. The computing power allowed you to do training and inference on that in real time. And so for us, think of the three businesses that Adobe is in. We're still best known for the creative set of products. I would say every person still has the fear of a blank page. And so if I can describe what's in my head about, whatever composition I want to do, the fact that this AI can enable you to do it in an incredibly fast way, I think hopefully overcomes this fear of, the blank screen. Content production. The act of, if you have a movie and frame by frame, you're trying to change it. So automation, production, localization, personalization. Again, for that entire content supply chain, now you have the ability to really automate it. We've done a lot with collaboration. We bought this company called Frame.io. And so I think that's the other thing so for creative, and a product called Express that we just introduced, which is creation for the, for the billions. And so I think AI is going to be this absolutely incredible accelerant at the front end of the creative process. And it's going to be this incredible accelerant at the back end of this process.
But like you said, I mean, obviously we all know that one of the threats of AI is said to be how it will kind of, it might kill the creative industry. And I know it's an exaggeration. So what is your
My
views on that?
my perspective is it'll actually be a massive tailwind for the creative industry. I believe that. I mean, if you think about what Adobe and what role we have played in society, we've democratized the ability for people to have a creative idea, have that creative idea. And every time you have one of these successive advancements, everybody said, oh my God, it's the end of whatever as we know it. I mean, are more movies being produced today than ever before? Absolutely. Are more, short form things being done, animation. So I believe, at least in my professional lifetime, this is going to augment human ingenuity, not replace it.
Could you tell us something about, two separate questions really. One is, what is Adobe India doing in terms of the research, in terms of its contribution to the development of AI? And a macro question, how can a country like India use a technology like AI?
So two answers to that. The first is, we, as you know, from day one, we invested in a workforce where we said this is going to be core to every product that we build. And so Abhigyan actually runs the entire document and PDF business globally. So this is everything to do with our document cloud franchise is being done. So I think the way to answer Illustrator, there's this feature that's been just released called generative recolor. Or think about text, you identify a text and you want to get a prompt or a vector to start your creative process. All of that development's happening here. So the development's happening again on all three layers. We're developing models here, which is our models, based on our data for the domains in which we are interested. We're building and collecting data in an appropriate way, and we're building the interfaces into each of our applications. So we just look at Adobe India as an extension of everything that we do globally. We're so unlike traditional companies that looked at it and said, how do I, perhaps do grunt work? That has been so far from the truth. For us, it's been core to everything that we do as an innovative company. I think your second question is, I think people are going to change who they look for. I think we all saw this incredible explosion of people who could code, right? But those skills will have to change. And people will now have to think about, am I building models and how am I building models? And so I think in some sense, therefore, people are being more productive with things like GitHub, Copilot and stuff like that. But the way I think we tend to think about it is, are you building a new set of skills that allows people to build models? And I think that's going to be different.
What's your view on, there have been all these statements by the great and good of the AI industry asking for regulation. What is your view on regulation of the sector? What is it that can be regulated?
First, I think the pace is moving so fast that people who are asking for a moratorium are people who are probably behind and want to catch up, as opposed to people who are doing it for the greater good. I think a company like Adobe always looks at it and says, when you think about the purpose of Adobe, we say three things. We talk about Adobe for all, which is our employees, it's our intellectual property. We talk about creativity for all, and we talk about technology to transform. And what we mean by that is every technology we believe does societal good, but it has implications. And so are we thinking about the unintended consequences of what that happens? If you haven't already, we should brief you on our content authenticity initiative to combat content authenticity, content credentials. Think of it as a nutritional label on any piece of content that's being created. We have hundreds of partners, New York Times, Microsoft, chip manufacturers, Qualcomm, NVIDIA, who've all said, let's make sure we work together to create this nutrition label, specify where the content was created from, when we're distributing the piece of content, what's the provenance of that content, what's the attribution of the content. So I think the second answer I would say is that we first start with the possibilities, and then we spend equal amount of time thinking about the unintended consequences. And then as a responsible company, what can we do in that respect? So I think there are a couple of things. First, data. Whose data? How are you protecting it? What are the rights associated with your data? And I think a lot of countries and companies are first focused on that. The second thing I think we then think about is, how do you verify? I mean, the thing about AI is that it's extremely confident, both when it's right and perhaps when it's wrong, right? And so I think, reflecting, when was this machine generated versus when this was human generated? But the net I would answer is, I think for the first time on a mobile phone, I can have a personalized tutor that can enable billions of people to have the education system that they deserve. For the first time, we can have health and personalized health that enables me to, with AI, do this. Financial inclusion, all the things, creativity. So I believe the possibilities are what really drives us. And then we will be very responsible stewards of understanding ethical biases. When we created Firefly, right? What are the biases or the inherent biases that might emerge if you don't pay attention to it? So I think we, absolutely make sure that we focus a lot on that. I do not believe that we're ready for, major regulation at this point because it's going so fast. But I think we can identify a set of principles that people can talk about. What's the transparency associated with data? What's the veracity of this? And I think if you start with those principles, that's, I think, the way for industry and government to responsibly advance this agenda.
So you're here at B20 right now, and India seems to be a bright spot in the global economy right now. So what are your thoughts on India?
First, to comment on that this week without commenting on the incredible achievement of the moon landing, would be really a miss on my part. And so, I think the demographics, I think the access to education, I think the access to technology, the future is bright. And I think with the macro economic and political issues that are emerging with other neighboring countries, I think even for manufacturing, industries that were perceived not to be perhaps industries where India was looked to as a beacon of hope or as a leader, I think those are new opportunities. I've said many times, if I was growing up today, I don't know that I'd leave India, and so every time I come here, I'm just,
Really?
I really mean that. You have to get, I'm old, so you have to reflect that 40 years ago, they weren't, if you were in tech, where would you go? You'd go abroad. If you look at the top academic institutions, and if you look at the percentage of people who are going abroad nowadays from those top educational institutions, it's a minuscule portion, right, of that. And so I think the talent that exists, the access to capital certainly exists, right, and the opportunity exists. And I think the Indian entrepreneurs don't look at it as a Indian opportunity, as a global. So I'm a big supporter. The other thing that I've truly been amazed with is scale, right? I mean, when you think about India, the opportunity for India is this massive scale. And they've done, I think, a really good job of what are the fundamental plumbings of infrastructure. I mean, the fact that you have this digital identifier, the fact that you have this universal payment scheme. I mean, when would I have thought that, you could go to a Bandi and, get a Pani Puri or something like that, and you just pay for it through, it's staggering, and maybe because you're in this place, you don't look at it with the sort of amazement that we look at it. And I think if you can keep building on top of these, you talk to company after company here, you look at their growth rates, you look at how they're managing profitability and growth, you look at their global aspirations. I'm like, how can you not be a fan?
And then I also wanted to understand from you that, what is it that India can do to further cement its spot when it comes to being a leader in the global economy? The conversation has already moved to the fact that India is already a developed country and we are no more a developing nation. So what are the challenges, what are the things that India can do to further cement its position?
Again, I think access to education is always, the bottom of the pyramid, right? I mean, the fact is that with the population demographics that you have, I mean, are you ensuring people access to education? So again, I think we've done an amazing job in the country, but that's sort of the basis of that. I think the digital infrastructure and the physical infrastructure, right? I mean, that does help. I mean, we were talking to Air India, and if you look at what their ambitions are for connecting the country and transportation, and but that's always one of these things. And then I think from a government private sector, it's the ease of doing business, right? And even that is dramatically improved, relative to what it used to be. So I think it's the basic building blocks, but I can't really, in good faith, say, wow, I'm disappointed at something that's happening, because it feels like, all the right things are happening. They may not happen all the time at the scale at which, or the speed at which people here want it, but from outside. And I think I get the benefit of sometimes just zooming out, and I was like, it's amazing.
What are your thoughts on the global economy? What do you think of the macroeconomic challenges that are facing the world? Are we out of the woods yet?
I think the doom and gloom, I wasn't a believer, and the business has actually continued. And I think more and more people are now saying consumer resilience. And I think, in many ways, perhaps we didn't fully appreciate how, as a result of the pandemic, the disposable income for a lot of people, because maybe some parts of what they had to do were cut out. It increased disposable income. It forced productivity. And so I think we're continuing to see the benefits of that.
Thank you so much for speaking to ET today.